How many games should you own for each of your consoles? Now that's a loaded question because that's going to depend on a lot of different factors that vary from person to person. And the immediate answer might just seem like, well, as many games as possible, but that's not always the case for a lot of us, and even some of the collectors who have tons and tons of games, even though they're trying to get more games than most of us are, they still do have standards as far as what they will and won't pick up, unless they're going for a complete set or something like that, but that's a unique circumstance. Okay, so one of the first things we may want to consider is how many other consoles do we have? Depending how many consoles you have, you can only play so many games. There's only so many hours in the day and so much free time that we have. So it makes sense that if you have a ton of consoles, some of those consoles you maybe just won't play as much as your favorite ones. So naturally, the consoles that we have the most games for are typically just some of our favorites. That's how it works. I mean, it makes sense. If you like the console, it's probably because it has lots of games on it that you like, and therefore you try to get them and play them and all that good stuff. Now, one counter argument to this that I would like to make though, is that there's this idea that if you don't have a lot of games for a console, it's because you think the console is bad. And I just don't find this to be the case at all. I mean, you do still have that console, so you must like something about it, and sometimes you're just okay only having not very many games for a console, and you still get a lot of enjoyment out of it. A good example is that Castlevania is actually the only PSP game that I have. Now, sure, there are a few games on here, and I've only played actually 2 of the 3. I like the 2 older games on this, but anyways, I've had so much fun playing my PSP, just being able to play these games on it. And so I would say that I really like the PSP. And sure, I do plan on picking up 1 or 2 more games for it down the road, but it helps illustrate my point that how much you enjoy the games is just as important, if not more important, than how many games you have. Let me just throw this out there. Say you have 10 games for a console that you really love. That's awesome, right? You can play them all the time, it's great, they give you a lot of enjoyment. Or say you have 5 games that you really like, and then 25 additional games for a total of 30, but those 25 games you're kind of just, they're sort of mediocre, whatever. What would you rather have? Obviously, you would rather have those 10 games that you really love. So how much you enjoy your games is so important compared to how many you have. It's all about quality over quantity, right? And sure, you can have both quality and quantity, as a lot of us do, but that's where our personal opinion on how many good games a system has comes into play. And it's not just about how many good games do we think a console has, because sometimes we'll acknowledge that a game is good, but it's just not for us. It either doesn't click, or it's not the right genre, or maybe we like different games in the series better and so we think we would never play it. It could be a number of different reasons. And then on the flip side, this could go the other way around too, where we could think a game is bad but still want it anyways, either because it has some sort of interesting historical context, or we have some nostalgic tie to it. It could be a number of reasons like that. Okay, and so this all leads into one of the main points that I want to make for this video, which is that you have got to be honest about how much time you have to play these games and how comfortable you are with either not playing some of your games very much, if at all, and then also which games you really want to play a lot of. And you gotta consider all of this when collecting these games. Otherwise, you're gonna feel bad because you're like, man, I wish I could play this game more, or that game more. And maybe you can get to it at some point down the road, but you gotta think about all of this when considering how many games you want to have. Another thing that I find to be useful is to have a wish list of the games that you would like to have at some point. That way you don't necessarily feel pressure to get it all immediately, which is something that I see sometimes. And sure, some of the prices of these games may be rising, and so there is a little bit of urgency to get them sooner than later, but the thing is, you'll always have time to get around to these games at some point, and you never know what kind of deal might pop up for some of them. Something else to keep in mind while watching this video is that I do operate with a very big consolidation bias, meaning that I think consolidation can benefit pretty much anybody who owns games in one way or another. And even though what that consolidation looks like for one gamer might differ for another, I just think it helps make your collection feel like more of a curation and helps focus on the games that you really like the most. And again, for some collectors it may just be one or two games, or perhaps none at all. It may not benefit certain collectors, but I do think it is something that could benefit a lot of us, and it's an idea that's just not embraced enough. If you would like to see my video about consolidation, I will put a link down below to the video where I go through it, and I think I make some pretty compelling arguments in that video. I think I could convince some of you. Anyways, that about does it for my thoughts on how many games you should collect for each console, but of course I want to hear what all of you have to say. Do you have a specific number in mind, or perhaps something more philosophical like the way I look at it? I would love to hear what you all have to say, so be sure to leave those comments down below. As always, I will see ya in the next video.